Well, thank you. It's good to be with you all this morning. And first of all, I won't go into the data, but it's very clear that emotional disorders are at an all-time high. College students a few years ago, 60%, this was 2 or 3 years ago, 60% of college students today nationwide have a diagnosable mental illness. 60%. That includes depression, anxiety, phobias, substance abuse, addictions. When you add this all up, it's 60%. Those things used to be less than 10% when I was going to college. And just to give you an example of the rapid rise, in 1993, a study was done of less than 25-year-old females in America. One of the signs of an emotional disorder is what we call self-mutilation, cutting. Anyone want to guess what percent of females under the age of 25 cut in 1993? It was 1%. Every 7 years, they do another analysis. In 2000, it was, anyone want to guess? 10%. It was 2%. In 2007, it was 4%. Do you understand exponential function? So we've got a doubling, 1%, 2%, 4% in 2007, and then they looked at it again in 2014. What do you think it was? 25.6%. It is on a rapid rise. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of other mental health issues underneath that in those that even don't necessarily have emotional disorders. Now, what I was talking about, particularly in the EQ Summit, and I'm just giving this these same slides, was particularly the rapid rise in Generation Y and Z. You may not know what generation you're in, but you're going to find out here today. Before Y and Z was Generation X, and these are people born from 1965 to 1977. Before this was the baby boom generation. And there's still a generation yet alive before the baby boomers. So currently there are 6 generations coexisting here on planet Earth. And in 1965, which was post-baby boomers, they consider themselves the passed-over generation. They think the boomers got the stuff. And I'll just let you know, I'm a baby boomer, as some of your faculty members are as well, so I'm in the boomer generation. But those behind the boomers our boomlets, which we'll talk about in a little bit, get the attention, but they believe themselves to be the forgotten middle child. But this is the generation that really pushed the idea that there is no absolute truth. Truth is what? Relative. And they often came home to an empty house from school. Why is that the case? Mom and dad were both working. Unlike the baby boomer generation, where often there was a mother to greet them when they came home, the Generation X came home to an empty house. Generation Y is the generation born from 77 to 95. I have 4 sons, and 2 of them belong to this generation, comprising primarily the children of the baby boomers, but typically perceived as increasingly familiar with digital and electronic technology. And this generation is called the what? Why are they called the millennials? Because they're a person reaching young adulthood around the year 2000 when the millennium occurred. Millennials were considered the first global generation because of the development of the internet. And so these were the internet generation. Generation Z are those born after 1995. Now there's multiple names. There hasn't been really a settled name for this generation, but they're called post-millennials, the I generation. They're also called what? Founders. Now I had to look that up. Why were they called founders? Because they named themselves this. They were trying to find a name. But they didn't tell anywhere what they founded, but they have, as you'll see, this generation has a pretty high opinion of themselves, and it's reflected on the fact that they would come up with this name, founders, for themselves. Plurals, and also the homeland generation. This generation makes up over a quarter of the United States population and is the largest percentage of any of the 6 generations alive today. Even though they're a young generation, they contribute $44 billion to the American economy. Now, they'll post this about themselves on Generation Z, but I needed to look up $44 billion. Boy, it sounds like a very impressive generation, but then I had to realize, what is the economy? It's 19 trillion. So in reality, you're not controlling that much percent of the economic wealth at this point. By 2020, however, they will account for 1/3 of the U.S. population. 40% of Generation Z admit to being addicted to what? To their devices. Now, as you'll discover, this is a wise acknowledgement, but the amount that are actually addicted, based on the American Addiction Association definition of addiction, is far greater than this. But 40% own up to the fact that they're addicted to their devices. 30% of millennials also admit being addicted to their devices. And Generation Z is known as the generation that chose Instagram over Facebook as well. 62% of Generation Z anticipate challenges working with baby boomers and Generation X. So when you ask them and they say, in the workplace, these are people I'm going to have problems with if they're my bosses. The boomers and the Generation Xers, not sure I'm going to be able to work in that environment very well. But 5% of Generation Z anticipate challenges working with millennials. They think, okay, well, this is the group I can work with, I can identify with, and it's not going to be a problem. In 2006, this would be Generation Z, there was a record number of births in this country. Half of all of those births were born Hispanic. And in that year, the most common name in America changed. Anyone want to guess what the most common name in America was prior to 2006? No, let's talk about last name. What was the most common last name?
Garcia.
It was Smith before 2006. Now the most common name in America has changed to Rodriguez as being number 1. But there are a lot of Garcias and Martinez's and others as well. Now, our thoughts and feelings often previously were thought to be only sequestered right here in our skulls. But now we know that this is obviously false. We now know that they can be skewed by external forces we're not even aware of. The brain is a monitoring system as well as a what? A thinking system. But its attention is drawn toward any object that is new, intriguing, or otherwise striking. Media and communication devices, from telephones to TV sets, have always tapped into this instinct, the intriguing, striking, or maybe new device. Whether turned on or switched off, they promise an unending supply of information and what else? Experiences. By design, they grab and hold our attention in ways natural objects never could. Out of all media devices, the smartphone stands out. Because the phone is packed with so many forms of information and so many useful and entertaining functions, it acts as what Dr. Ward calls a supernormal stimulus. One that can hijack attention whenever it is part of our surroundings, which it always is. Imagine combining a mailbox, a newspaper, a TV, a radio, a photo album, a public library, and a boisterous party attended by everyone you know. then compressing them all into a single small radiant object. That is what a smartphone represents to us. And no wonder we can't take our minds off it. A 2015 Gallup poll, let's see if I can go back to what was skipped over. In a 2015 Gallup poll, more than half of iPhone owners said that they couldn't imagine life without the device. And I can tell you, in our depression and anxiety recovery program, some of you might know about this because you live on campus, but we take people's devices away from them when they come into our program. And we've had many people, particularly in your generation, say, I'd rather go without food for 10 days than you take this device away from me. All right, you might be a little different than some of them coming. But it's something that, and they say, you know, I'm here for my anxiety. You've just made my anxiety go up tenfold because this is a part of me. You know, how am I going to, and they'll come up with all of these reasons as to why they should be the exception and not have their devices taken away. It's hard to imagine another product that has provided so many useful functions in such a handy form. But while our phones offer convenience and diversion, they also breed anxiety. Their extraordinary usefulness gives them an unprecedented hold on our attention and vast influence over our thinking and behavior. What happens to our minds when we allow a single tool such dominion over our perception and cognition? As the brain grows dependent on technology, studies show what weakens? The intellect weakens. Using a smartphone or even hearing one ring or vibrate produces distractions that make it harder to concentrate on a difficult problem or job. And it doesn't have to be a smartphone, as you'll see when we get into this. It could be a laptop where you're allowed to have push notifications, or you have those types of little distractions that come up as you are trying to do your work. But these distractions make it harder to concentrate on a difficult problem or job. The division of attention impedes reasoning and performance. Now, when people's phones beep or buzz while they're in the middle of a challenging task, their focus wavers and their work gets sloppier, whether they check the phone or not. When people hear their phone ring but are unable to answer it, their blood pressure spikes, their pulse quickens, and their problem-solving skills decline. A study was done of 520 undergraduate students just south of here. UCSD stands for University of California, San Diego. And they were given two standard tests of intellectual acuity. One test gauged available cognitive capacity, a measure of how fully a person's mind can focus on a particular task. The second assessed fluid intelligence, a person's ability to interpret and solve an unfamiliar problem. The only variable in the experiment was the location of the subject's smartphones. Some of the students were asked to place their phones in front of them on their desks. Others were told to stow their phones in their pockets or handbags. Still others were required to leave their phones in a different room. The results were striking. In both tests, the subjects whose phones were in view posted the worst scores, while those who left their phones in a different room did the best. The students who kept their phones in their pockets or bags came out in the middle. As the phone's proximity increased, brain power decreased. In subsequent interviews, nearly all the participants said that their phones had not been a distraction, that they hadn't even thought about the devices during the experiment. They remained oblivious even as the phones disrupted their focus and thinking. A second experiment conducted by the researchers produced similar results, while also revealing that the more heavily students relied on their phones in their everyday lives, the greater the cognitive penalty they suffered. Our attachment to our phones have grown so intense that their mere presence diminishes intelligence. Dr. Ward and his colleagues wrote that the integration of smartphones into daily life appears to cause a brain drain that can diminish such vital mental skills as learning, logical reasoning, abstract thought, problem solving, and creativity. People who had their phones in view albeit turned off during 2 demanding tests of attention and cognition, made significantly more errors than did a control group whose phones remained out of sight. The 2 groups performed about the same on a set of easier tests. So if it's easier tests, it doesn't seem to make as much of a difference. But when it's demanding tests, it makes a very striking, significant difference. Researchers examined how smartphones affected learning in a lecture class with 160 students at the University of Arkansas at Monticello. They found that students who didn't bring their phones to their classroom scored a full letter grade higher on a test of the material presented than those who brought their phones. It didn't matter whether the students who had their phones used them or not. All of them scored equally poorly. Now, this was an interesting study. 91 secondary schools, and by the way, what type of school is Weimar Academy? It's called a secondary school. In the United Kingdom, published in the journal Labor Economics, found that when schools ban smartphones, students' examination scores go up substantially, with the weakest students benefiting the most. Using devices, quote, normally significantly reduces your brain's capacity to process information. According to a study from the University of London, multitasking actually reduces your IQ, with multitasking men dropping an average of 15 points, effectively giving them the same cognitive capabilities as an 8-year-old child. So we wonder why adults act like 8-year-olds. This could be part of the reason. And the multitasking, often they think they're sharper if they're multitasking or it's doing something beneficial for them. You know, for instance, I've run into students who think, wait a minute, I don't want to just do my homework. It actually is nice to get these little distraction things because it gives me a break, and I need a break in order to be able to do better. But the studies show that this is actually decreasing their cognitive capacity significantly. Plus, it's doing some potentially more permanent things. University of Sussex in the UK compared the amount of time people spent on multiple devices, such as texting while watching TV, to MRI scans of their brains. They found that these device users had less brain density in the anterior cingulate cortex, a region responsible for what? Empathy, as well as cognitive and emotional control. This is in the front part of the brain. In a study conducted at the University of Essex in the UK, 140 participants were divided into pairs and asked to converse in private for 10 minutes. Half talked with a phone in the room, while half had no phone present. The subjects were then given tests of affinity, trust, and empathy. The mere presence of mobile phones inhibited the development of interpersonal closeness and trust. It diminished the extent to which individuals felt empathy and understanding from their partners. The downsides were strongest when a personally meaningful topic was being discussed. So this is talking about, you know, your friend group, your peer group, your family. These are, you know, the people closest to you. And what's happening is personally meaningful topics are actually not being discussed near as much, or with the type of engagement where you're involving the whole person as what used to be in previous generations. And the reason why you're even feeling less empathy from family members or from workmates or those type of things has to do with this mobile phone being present. Now, of the 6 current generations, each successive generation believes that they are more digitally savvy. Each successive generation, however, is actually less focused and has lower attention spans. Each successive generation actually has been shown to have less ability to manage their emotions. We'll get into emotions here in a little bit, but also we need to look at memory. People's knowledge and understanding may actually dwindle as gadgets grant them easier access to online data stores. Memory experts had a group of volunteers read 40 brief factual statements. Not a lot, but 40 factual statements. Half the people were told that the machine would save what they typed. So as they're reading these 40 factual statements, they're typing them in to try to remember. Half were told that the statements would be immediately erased. Afterward, the researchers asked the subjects to write down as many of the statements as they could remember. Those who believed that the facts had been recorded in the computer demonstrated much weaker recall than those who assumed the facts wouldn't be stored. Anticipating that information would be readily available in the digital form seemed to reduce the mental effort that people made to remember it. The researchers dubbed this phenomena the what effect? The Google effect. Because search engines are continually available to us, we may often be in a state of not feeling we need to encode the information internally. When we need it, we will look it up. But the art of remembering is actually the art of thinking. In order to remember something, you have to associate it with something. And I'll just give you an example here at Weimar College. One of the reasons why our pre-med students have the highest rates of acceptance into U.S. medical schools is because of the way they're taught the sciences. Dr. Harris, for instance, she not only teaches you the chemical equations, she teaches you biblical principles that align with those chemical equations. So when our students are taking an MCAT examination actually is an IQ test once you know the sciences. So you have to know the sciences, and now you have to utilize the sciences to solve new problems that you've never seen before. And so they'll have this new problem, and they'll say, I've never seen this before. But then they'll think of the biblical principle, and then they'll remember the chemical principle, and then they'll be able to solve the problem. And that association actually helps them. You might think, wait a minute, that's even too much. It's enough to learn the chemistry. But now I'm having to learn a biblical principle that goes along with it. It actually helps their memory significantly. And so the art of remembering is actually the art of thinking. And so the more you have to remember and associate it with things, the better you are at actually putting this all together and being able to problem solve later on. But because of this Google effect where you think you can look up any kind of data that you want to, when you want to, you actually don't have the ability to be able to interpret the data and those other data sets near as well. Only by encoding information in our biological memory can we weave the rich intellectual associations that form the essence of personal knowledge and give rise to critical and conceptual thinking. No matter how much information swirls around us, the less well-stocked our memory, the less we have to do what? To think with. When people call up information through their devices, they often end up suffering from delusions of intelligence, according to the science. The advent of the information age seems to have created a generation of people who feel they know more than ever before, the scholars concluded, even though they may know even less about the world around them. That insight sheds light on our society's current gullibility crisis, in which people are all too quick to credit lies and half-truths spread through social media or news outlets. If media and devices have sapped your powers of discernment, you'll believe anything you are told by them. And this is why Generation Z, in particular, and also to a large extent Generation Y, are being called the most gullible generations. These are individuals who are actually spit out thoughts and reasoning of others, but are not able to because of this Google effect, they're not able to really put this all together and come up with more creativity. Now there's a large study. You may say, well, 520 students, one was 120 students. This study is a major survey looking at the lives of how many? 1 million young people. Teens who spend large amounts of time glued to phone and computer screens are markedly less happy than those who prefer real-world activities and interactions, according to the study. Monitoring the future, whether it's using social media, like Instagram or any of those others, whether it's texting, whether it's video chatting, or whether it's multi-platform video games, or anything that is associated with this screen time, the screen time itself was all associated with less happiness. And this was just published in the journal Emotion, and you can see San Diego, again, is looking at this. This is Professor Gene Twenge, who is the head of this 1 million student study. Although observational studies cannot prove causation, he mentioned, several other studies have shown that the more social media leads to unhappiness, but unhappiness does not lead to more social media use. So in other words, it's the social media and the screens that are driving the unhappiness, and not just because you're unhappy, you're gravitated to more screens. Youth who invested more time in non-screen activities, like playing sports, reading actual print, like newspapers, face-to-face social interaction, were significantly happier. The life satisfaction, self-worth, happiness of young people in the U.S. plummeted, particularly after 2012. And that was the year when the proportion of Americans owning a smartphone rose above 50%. The happiest teenagers were those who used digital media less than how much? An hour a day. Those are the happiest. Those are the ones that are also able to manage their emotions the most. After a daily hour of screen time, levels of unhappiness rose steadily and in a linear fashion. By far, the largest change in teens' lives between 2012 and 2016 was the increase in the amount of time they spent on digital media and the subsequent decline in in-person social activities, and also a decline in sleep. The advent of the smartphone and the increased use of other screens is the most plausible explanation for the sudden decrease in teens' psychological well-being. So the key to digital media use and happiness is what? Limited use. And if you are going to use it, intelligent use. The lead author said, aim to spend no more max than 2 hours a day on digital media. Try to increase the amount of time you spend seeing friends face to face. Physically exercise. And those second and third bullet points are two activities reliably linked to greater happiness. So there are multiple experts now calling on parents, teachers, and governments to ban the use of all handheld enhances attention and learning ability. Use of technology under the age of 12 years is detrimental to child development and learning, as shown by Rowan several years ago. The obesity epidemic is another. 1 in 4 Canadian and 1 in 3 U.S. children are obese. TV and video game use correlates with increased obesity. Children who are allowed a device in their bedrooms have a 30% increased risk in obesity. And Andrew Prentice says, your generation, Y and Z, may be the first generation in America that does not outlive their parents. And we're already seeing evidence of this, where lives are being shortened as a result. Number 4, sleep deprivation. 60% of parents don't supervise their child's technology use. 75% of children are allowed technology in their bedrooms. 75% of children aged 9 and 10 are sleep deprived to the extent that their grades are detrimentally impacted. And in 2015, 40% of adolescents got less than 7 hours of sleep a night, which represents a 17% worsening in just 6 years and a 58% worsening from a 1991 study. This shift in sleeping habits was likely directly attributable to increased internet use. For instance, teens who use the web for at least 5 hours a day were 50% more likely to get insufficient sleep than peers who only spent an hour online a day. And by the way, we could go into the sleep aspect of things, but when you're using a device within 3 hours of bedtime, there's less melatonin, there's a delayed shift, so you're always going to want to get up later and later and go to bed later and later. And you particularly don't want to use your device an hour before bedtime, but 3 hours is where it's going to start affecting melatonin. Number 5, mental illness. Technology overuse is implicated as a causal factor in rising rates of child depression, anxiety, attachment disorders, attention deficit, autism, bipolar, psychosis, and problematic child behavior. 1 in 6 Canadian children have a diagnosed mental illness, many of whom are on dangerous psychotropic medications. And by the way, there is a psychiatrist in Southern California, Victoria Dunkley, and she has written a book called Resetting Your Brain. Or as an adolescent psychiatrist, she also has Resetting Your Child's Brain. And she says she will not diagnose ADHD, bipolar, depression, anxiety in any of her clients or patients that come to her until they are completely screen-free for 6 weeks. And she says sometimes it'll take 3 to 4 months, but in 6 weeks of being screen-free, their brains will normalize. And all of this diagnosis of all of these mental disorders actually ends up going away. So it's the screens that drive it. And she says this will raise grades, this will boost your social skills, and she has a lot of evidence to go with it. And a lot of her book is explaining how to do this brain reset. And she talks about how parents are often against it, schools are often against it, because you have to get on the computer to even do things at school. And she talks about how there needs to be a corporate buy-in by school systems, by parents, and kids also understanding the need for this in order to be able to be successful screen-free for weeks, to be able to start optimizing that brain in a far better way. Number 6, digital dementia. High-speed media content can contribute to attention deficit as well as decreased concentration and memory due to the brain pruning neuronal tracks to the frontal cortex. Children who can't pay attention can't learn. And number 7, addictions. And let me go back to if you can't pay attention, you can't learn. When you are continually being distracted, or even intermittently distracted, and you're not allowing your brain to completely focus for 40 or 50 minutes, you actually lose that neuronal ability to focus over time because your brain is not having to be diligent in regards to that. And the area of your brain that requires focused attention is identical to the area of your brain for managing distressing emotions. And so you have to be able to have that focus. Number 7, addictions. As parents attach more and more to technology, they are detaching from their children. In the absence of parental attachment, detached children can attach to devices, which also results in addiction. 1 in 11 children age 8 to 18 were addicted to technology before 2009, and we know it's far higher today. So all of this is concerning. We have the highest rates of mental illness ever in America. We have the lowest scores ever in emotional intelligence. And we have this generation who think they're the most informed generation. They also have the greatest pride in their own abilities, but the evidence is that they are the least informed and the most gullible of all generations. But I don't think we can just give them up as doomed. There is a way out of this. I've already talked about this book. It would be well worth your reading. But turn off and tune out before dropping in. If you do have to use a device, start by batching all email activities into set times throughout the day. Outside of those times, don't check your email inbox. Segregate action items and to-do items so that you can crush each group separately. And so as you segregate this, you're going to be a lot more efficient. Multitasking is proven to be inefficient, so segregating items is the better pathway to follow. For tasks that take intense focus, you need to turn off and remove yourself from all digital distractions. Activities such as writing personalized emails, writing reports, creating marketing copy, and conducting research all require freedom to think. This also goes for more routine activities such as organizing files, preparing presentations, and other administrative tasks. Start by planning your time accordingly. If you need an hour to do a task, block out the time in advance so you're both prepared and free from distractions. And before settling down to do the task, make sure you have all the materials, research contacts, and so on ready for you when you start so that you don't have to search through programs and files during your work block. When you're ready to start work, tune out and turn off any digital distractions that might plague you. This includes all of the social media, even your email inbox, even your text messenger. Then without notifications intermittently pinging on your screen, you can actually get some meaningful work done. And as mentioned by the person who authored the phrase emotional intelligence in 1990, Daniel Goleman, he says the circuitry for paying attention once again, is identical for the circuits for managing distressing emotions. The attentional circuitry needs to have the experience of sustained episodes of concentration, reading the text, understanding and listening to what the teacher is saying in order to build the mental models that create someone who is well educated. He mentions one of the keys to success is a digital Sabbath every day, sometime when even kids and adults aren't being distracted by devices at all and are engaged in focused learning. So, the subject of electronic fasts, which is what Victoria Dunkley highly recommends and has seen it so effective across the board, touches a collective nerve. It triggers anxiety about parenting practices or defensiveness about one's own media and device practices. Some resent that the scientific community has not been more forceful about the dangers of media and devices. You know, Steve Jobs, for instance, although he invented it, he recognized it was problematic. He would not allow his kids to have free access to it. He realized this, but that type of thing didn't get broadcast very much. And everyone was so excited about these devices, but they weren't looking at the risks. Others resent being told how to live or how to parent. In other words, you know, you're telling me less or controlled media or no media. An electronic fast is no screens for weeks. And all of this produces conflicting feelings. There are burning questions. Are the electronics I enjoy truly dangerous, or are fears overblown? Does it affect all people or just a few? What options do I have if it is affecting me or my child or myself? Meanwhile, electronic devices are everywhere. Limiting or eliminating exposure seems like folly. So there's doubt and uncertainty often when people are thinking about this. And that doubt and uncertainty is a critical roadblock to a successful brain reboot. If you're uncertain about media effects, know you are not alone. Just about everyone who chooses to reset their brain with device fasts has doubts before they do it. We also have to deal with the doubts and skepticism of others and often need their cooperation. Often only by persevering and following a strict fast can you see the results, however, for yourself or your children. So the question is, will it be worth making a change? Is it worth changing my device relationship? How much benefit will I or my children experience? Impacts and benefits are both direct and indirect, but you can't be sure how beneficial it will be until when? Until you do it. What is very clear, however, is the more anxiety and anger you or your children have over making this change, the more a decided change is needed. Often people say, well, my family's reaction will be negative, provoking rage, depression, or aggression. My child or spouse might, quotes, hate me for taking their media devices away. I will, quotes, lose, quotes, bonding time with my spouse, child, or friend, since this is what we, quotes, do together. We're all on our devices. You've seen pictures of families all on their devices, not communicating and doing this sort of thing, and this is what they, quotes, do together. But I can tell you, family interactions, once you go through a family screen fast, is far better and healthier and filled with a lot more empathy. This could separate or isolate me or my child from peers who continue to use their devices without limitations. Plus, it seems too hard to accomplish since electronic devices are everywhere. I don't want to cut back or change my own media experiences. I might get more stressed and exhausted. And convincing others that could help my child will benefit from a media fast might be very difficult. Getting rid of my movies, iPads, and smartphones seems too difficult. Well, the short-term benefits have been well demonstrated. Your mood is measurably happier, you're more emotionally stable, you're less irritable in just a few weeks. Better focus, more organized, improved stress tolerance, and you're more creative. You're less impulsive, you're more compliant. You're better rested, and you're more physically active. You actually save money, and also studies show across the board less medication use, and there's less household stress, and far more family bonding. Long term, you optimize your academic career or creative potential. And let me just tell you my own personal experience growing up. I grew up in a home that had no entertainment television. I was the fifth child, and my father, as an authoritarian but loving parent, said, we're not going to have TV in the home. I thought that was way too extreme. I thought that he was overblowing it. And I felt like I was being persecuted by not having that television. Now, there were times that I did, go with my friends down the street, and, I did still see TV and things like that, but it wasn't near as accessible. And I remember particularly having discussions with him over this when it came time for watching my favorite sport at the time, which was Major League Baseball during the World Series. And he did comply, and we rented a television for 1 week during the World Series, where only the World Series was viewed, and after that game was over with, it was off. But I can tell you, I would not be standing before you today. I would have not had near the success or academic success. I probably would never have been a physician. I probably would have been not near as influential. I shouldn't say probably. I can tell you for sure I wouldn't have been. I was drawn to that television. And entertainment television does actually also decrease IQ. It does some of these same things. But this is even more serious than entertainment television. And so I thank my father every day for what he ordered on our family. My mom even thought it was extreme. And she would kind of sympathize with me in this whole deal. But it was not extreme. It was actually very beneficial. And the same types of things happened with Ben Carson. He tells you he would never have become successful without the elimination of the screens of the day, which were entertainment television. And so on the front end, it seems like a sacrifice. It seems like you're being persecuted. But on the long-term aspects in regards to academic career, creative potential, responsibility, your empathy, you'll make better relationship partners, your adrenal glands will improve, your memory improve, and of course other benefits. You can go places without risking meltdowns. So I would like to encourage you, decide today to e-fast. Make a wise and significant plan. Implement it soon. Count at least 6 weeks, and then reevaluate at that 6-week point. Then use it only smartly and aim for less than 1 hour per day where you have all of those notifications turned off during that hour and can go to your text or your emails, but only to do them and knock them out quickly. And then realize, and you'll have to tell your friends, you're not going to be on that device, but to just that one time a day. I'd like to invite someone who heard this talk from behind a camera. He was volunteering at the time I gave this talk less than 2 weeks ago at the EQ Summit. And as volunteering, he was filming. You can actually, for someone who wants to get this film, of course, I think it's being recorded here live. But there's a lot of people paying $25 for this DVD, even currently, and Bailey was behind this. But Bailey, tell me what your thoughts were about this talk.
As I was listening, he said something about making a plan to do it as soon as possible. And I was sitting there and I was taking notes. I was like, the conviction is hitting me now. If I'm going to do it, I need to follow through and do it now. And so I walked out after recording that session. I went, turned off all the notifications on my computer, turned off the notifications on my phone, and my phone right now is sitting in my room. And it has been for most of the past few, well, it's been a week and
2 weeks.
Almost 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
And I've noticed an increase in efficiency, an increase in focus, memory. You know, something that's interesting, if you're worried about your test scores, and the studies show that, you know, if you have your phone in the room with you, your test scores go down. How about our time with God? Do we take our phones with us in the morning when we're spending time with God? And I don't know, that's something interesting. These little devices that God has put in our lives, and not God, that the world has put in our lives, they can be a real distraction throughout. And even yesterday, I had a project that was given to me last minute that required me being on the screen. And I had to get it done yesterday for the college. And I was able to get it done because I recognized I wasn't surfing the internet or distracted by other things. And I was able to get it done in time with the short notice.
So you've noticed already some improvement at the 2-week point.
You know, it's been a blessing because I haven't missed anything. It's actually provided more time to talk on the phone with my family, which is something that I value because I've had more time open.
Has there been any downside to your decision?
No, there hasn't been.
All right, thank you. Anyone have any questions, comments? Yes.
Something I heard at the EQ Summit, I don't know if it was you, but it was even talking about taking notes, like reading from a screen, you know, your homework versus reading it on paper, and then also taking notes, how you remember better if it's handwritten than.
Yes, there's a lot more information I could have presented. There is a volumes of research being done on this now, but thanks for bringing that up. I did mention it verbally, and that is when we write things down, it's been well documented, if you write things down, you're much more likely to remember and actually think about it than if you type it in. And so we kind of type it in to save it. What would be a far better thing is to write it down, and then if you want to save it digitally or be able to refer back to it, maybe at a certain time every day, take a picture of the things that you've written so that you know that you're going to have that stored somewhere. But writing down is significantly better than typing things in as far as notes is concerned. Yes?
I'd like to ask Mr. Kruger what he thinks, how hard it would be to become a completely analog secondary school. How hard would that be?
All right. Mr. Kruger is being put on the spot.
I think it's doable.
All right. Okay.
The truth is we've lost the skill of handwriting. We've lost the skill of taking notes. We've lost or don't want to know the skill of how to read a book. We want a Kindle or we want some device.
I can almost guarantee if we go analog, there will be some groans, as we've already heard. But once this is explained, there is going to be an explosion of people wanting their family members to come to this school. Because of what's just mentioned. This is not just isolated research now. It's going everywhere, but nobody knows what to do with it. It's like, well, we've got to put up with these screens. It's kind of bad, but they take a fatalistic approach and say we're doomed. I don't want to say that you guys are doomed. There is a way out. And if we help provide that way out and make it easier, how much better we'll all be. Yes?
Yeah, I would think this would be really significant because teens of all age groups tend to report depression. And so that setup seems really right for depression when you're on the screen a lot, under family time, things like that.
Yes. Yes.
Well, and like Bailey said, even though he's using his screen, but he's changing how he's using it. And I think that's something we all immediately can do. And it's hard to show self-control in doing that. But you all can start doing that by showing self-control, turning off the chats, the group chats that you do while you're studying, all that stuff. Turn it off. Turn off those notifications. That's something you can do immediately and show your own self-control in doing that.
Good. Yes.
Adults need help too, so you all know that I struggle with this, and I know a lot of parents in here do as well. So as you're getting this information, don't think it's directed only at you, but work together as a family. You know, have conversations with your parents. If they're glued to their screen the whole time you're trying to have a conversation with them, you know, well, Dr. Nedley said that you but just share. Listen, I like, you know, how about we look at it together as a family, how we can grow relationally better in our conversations and in our relationships. And it's a family decision, and it's a way that we can all learn and grow in. So.
Great, thank you. And by the way, if you want your family members to see this, Mike did ask if we could have this talk today available for free online at the Weimar website. So you can refer anybody over to it and have them look at that talk, and then it can become a good discussion point.
It'll be on the Weimar Church.
Oh, the Weimar Church.
If that's all right, or if you want it to go on.
All right, no, it's fine. Weimar Church, whatever. I mean, wherever it's out there. Weimar Church Media is where you'll see it. Yes, question.
Do you know how much those programs like Night Shift or FLUX helps you to not suffer the bad effects of music?
Yeah, it's trying to filter out the blue light, which is the major issue. It does help some, but it doesn't help completely. And so, in fact, they've even looked at reading books versus, on a screen, for instance, a Kindle where all that blue light is taken away, versus reading printed books. And reading printed books, your melatonin level gets a good spike at night when you read printed books before going to bed, but when you read the Kindle, it doesn't. And so it's actually better, although if you have to do it, it'd be better to filter that blue out completely, like Bailey was having to do last night. But if you, it'd be good to plan your day so that you're actually reading printed books. All right, you've been attentive, and I hope this is helpful. Thank you.
Let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll, if we have any announcements, we'll make